Hello and welcome to another episode of Gameworms. I'm your host, Reil. Today we're going to be talking about the Barony of Letnev, a very exciting faction from Twilight Imperium 4, and this is one of the original factions, so you don't need the expansion to play it. The Barony are basically Drow in space. If you don't know what a Drow is, they're in Dungeons and Dragons, they're like subterranean elves. Very kind of proud, noble warrior faction, and they're very similar in Twilight Imperium. And so they're very, very focused on industry and warfare, are kind of their two big things. And they live on this planet, like a starless planet, a sunless planet called Arc Prime. Well, they have two planets. The first one is Arc Prime, which is kind of just a big rock with these huge, giant, continent-sized caves underneath the ground. And they have apparently a huge population. Let me double check what their population is. Almost 10.5 billion people between two planets, but mostly on this one, living mostly in these huge underground caverns. And the top of this planet is kind of a big barren rock, and there's only one city on the surface called Farouk. I don't really know how to pronounce it. Farouk. It's the only city that's on the surface. Is kind of just like black metal and warehouses and military installations. The air is really thin, so I think that city has to be compressed. And because really nothing can live on the surface, they're just all about polluting. So all the industry from underground vents up onto the surface, and it's kind of smoke. And they have kind of a cute description on the faction card, where a ship, like a merchant ship that goes to Arc Prime for a run, when they come back, they'll call it a chimney sweep. They call it a chimney sweeper just because it gets covered in soot. So it's kind of like, if you walk outside on the surface of Arc Prime, you're going to get like an oily film on you just because it's so filthy. The government is a barony. The leader is a man I think it's a man. I'm pretty sure it's a man. By the name of Daz Emisiel Weirkhan III. Who just wants to be emperor. The motivation, as far as I can tell behind the barony, he wants to be in charge. But it's very interesting is because the barony is actually the faction that ultimately led to the downfall of the Lazaks, because what happened is they were kind of difficult to deal with in the first place. And so the Lazaks, because they live on such a barren planet, basically underground they have these caves of mushrooms that they eat. But because they have so many people and such limited agricultural capability, food and medicines and things like that are very hard to come by. So they kind of rely a lot on trade with other factions. But because they were kind of proud and very given to rebel, the Lazaks put a lot of sanctions on them. So control a lot of how much access they had to food and trade and stuff like that. And so that's actually kind of pushed them to do a couple rebellions. And they finally rebelled by blockading a wormhole named Quan, and this is kind of where they got into conflict with the Soul that eventually led to the downfall of the Lazaks. So the weird thing that I don't really understand, so they have this planet that they live on. It's just floating through space. It doesn't orbit a sun. It kind of just meanders, as far as I can tell, through the blackness of space. But at some point, they've annexed another planet called Renterra, which, again, it's not a great planet. It's kind of a rocky planet, but it does have enough of a climate where they can grow food. And apparently it's also covered in some sort of giant wolves. But so they can use that planet as a source of food, but I don't know how it stays connected. Its orbit stays connected to Arc Prime. I couldn't really find that anywhere. But anyway, basically a hellscape. You don't want to live on either of these planets. Despite their horrific living conditions, they seemed like a very, kind of proud, nationalistic sort of a faction. And a lot of their abilities have to do with their military and industrial proficiency. They have, what I can tell, the best home system at 6 production. So in terms of production resources, 6, I'm pretty sure, is the highest in the game. They do only have 1 influence. Just nobody likes them because they're jerks. Starting technology, they have anti-mass deflectors. Pretty handy if you end up around an asteroid field. And plasma scoring, which kind of just plays into their aggressive nature. Starting units, 1 dreadnought, 1 carrier, 1 destroyer, 1 fighter, 3 infantry, and a space dock. So you only have 1 carrier, you only have 3 infantry. You do have the dreadnought, which does have a capacity of 1. But basically, you're starting with a lower number than is ideal for first round expansion. Okay, so, but even though they have kind of a small starting fleet, they have some very exciting military abilities that can quickly boost that skyward, I guess. Okay, for lack of a better adjective. So, if we look at their faction technology, if we look at their faction abilities, they have munitions reserves. At the start of each round of space combat, you may spend 2 trade goods. You may reroll any number of your dice during that combat round. So, expensive, sure, but if it's a clutch combat and you roll poorly, it might be worthwhile. Just make sure you're saving trade goods to use that if you're planning on getting some maybe close very fights. A lot of their abilities are really about swinging, fights a little bit in their favor. Armada. The maximum number of non-fighter ships you can have in each system is equal to 2 more than the number of tokens in your fleet pool. And that's, I think, maybe my favorite ability of theirs. Is that, so your fleet supply, in case you're not familiar, fleet supply is how many non-fighter ships or non-carried ships can fit in a system at a time. And I kind of think of it as like, how effective is your bureaucracy in having all these things maneuvering in the same space, So, or in this case, your military command. So, these guys are really good at that. So, they can have 2 more ships than the number of tokens in their fleet supply. All right, let's take a look what else they have here. Otherwise, most of their ships are kind of the standard fare. They do, of course, have the unique flagship, which is quite strong. It's called the Arc Secundus. Other players' units in the system lose planetary shield. So as long as you have your flagship, you don't need War Suns to get rid of planetary shield. Your dreadnoughts can just bombard. At the start of each space combat round, repair this ship. So the ship does have sustained damage. So if you take a hit during a fight, then at the beginning of every round, the Arc Secundus will repair itself. And this is going to be extra valuable when we get to their faction technologies. It has Bombardment 5, so it hits on a 5 or higher, and it gets 3 dice, so it's actually really good at bombing things. Combat is 5 dice, 5 or higher with 2 dice, so that's an 8-5-1-3, which is pretty standard. Well, the 8-1-3, 8 cost, move 1, capacity 3 is very standard. 5 is a pretty good combat roll for a flagship, and it's got 2 dice, so that's pretty good. But it's really the bombard and the self-repairing just makes this a pretty fierce combat-focused flagship. But while we're on that, before I jump to the mech, let's actually talk about their faction technology, because it really, 2 technologies, because one of them really builds onto that Arc Secundus ability, and that's the non-Euclidean shielding. So when one of your units uses sustained damage, cancel 2 hits instead of 1. So with a self-repairing flagship, you're, and whatever dreadnoughts you have, you're just soaking tons and tons of hits, which you can then repair. Now, of course, you still have to be careful of things like direct hits. The main thing I would just watch out for is the Mentak flagship, because it actually negates sustained damage entirely, so it's not going to work against them. But otherwise, fantastic defense system. Their other faction technology is L4 disruptors. During an invasion, units cannot use space cannon against your units. I don't know if I would seek this one out unless I needed a yellow anyway for prerequisite for something. Like if you really wanted to get... I don't know, because you already need one to get this one. I don't know what costs 2 yellow you'd really be that bent on. But, you'll slight edge if you need it in an invasion. It's not one I'd necessarily go out of my way to get, but the non-Euclidean shielding is great. All right, let's take a look at their mech now. So we've got the Dunlane Reaper. Deploy at the start of a round of ground combat. You may spend 2 resources to replace one of your infantry in that combat with 1 mech. So yeah, if you're, again, with those L4 disruptors, if you have the money, if you're making sure you're taking good care of collecting trade goods for all of your abilities, which you may want to do with these guys, which is tricky with these guys, unfortunately. But yeah, you could just throw a mech in there to replace one of your infantry. It does cost money, but it costs the same amount of money as if you're buying it new, but you can throw it directly into combat. Alright, let's take a look at their leaders. So these are with the Prophecy of Kings expansion. We've got the Viscount Unland. At the start of a space combat round, you may exhaust this card to choose one ship in the active system. That ship rolls one additional die during this combat round. I feel like this will be more important in the beginning of the game when you tend to have small skirmishes. You know, the more ships you have in a combat, the more diluted this ability is. But if it's like, you know, a 2-on-2 fight, this is going to be a huge deal. Especially got like a dreadnought or, you know, a ship with pretty good hit capabilities. Alright, so their commander is Rear Admiral Farron. The unique unlock for this commander is to have 5 non-fighter ships in one system, which for these guys should be pretty easy. His ability is after one of your units uses sustained damage, you may gain 1 trade good, and that's really perfect for these guys for a lot of reasons. So first of all, you have so many ships that sustain damage. You have so many abilities focused on sustaining damage. This is giving you money every time you damage a ship. But the real good thing with that is because so many of your other abilities require to have trade goods and you have a low commodity cap, you only get 2 commodities when trade is played. You really need these trade goods in your bank to be able to make best use of some of your other abilities, like your munitions reserves and your mech deployment. Alright, and their hero, of course, is unlocked with 3 objectives. Dark Talon Trela. Action. Place this card near the game board. The number of non-fighter ships you can have in systems is not limited by laws or by the number of command tokens in your fleet pool during this game round. At the end of that game round, purge this card. So this is I really like this. I'd say this maybe is in my top 5 of the heroes that I can think of. You can just play this at the beginning of the round, especially if you have something like Warfare, because what you could do with Warfare is you have to have the tokens in your fleet pool at the beginning of the turn, but then you could play Dark Matter Affinity, and then if you play your, do an attack or a combat or something, but then when you play your Warfare and remove that token, you also get to rearrange them everywhere. So you could just take everything right out of your fleet pool at that point, put them all into your, tactics or something, and just do a whole bunch of stuff if you needed to. So I think that's a pretty good ability. You can ignore fleet supply, get some massive combats in. The only downside is at the end of the round, anywhere where you're over your fleet supply limit, you have to start destroying ships. So it might be good for like a last round, move or something. But yeah, if you have some big armies in your way, you need to plow through, to get to Mechatol Rex for that final, objective or something, then pretty good ability. That's a bit what I can think of with these guys. No, not quite, because I almost forgot about their promissory note. At the start of so it's called War Funding. At the start of a round of space combat, the Letnev player loses 2 trade goods. During this combat round, reroll any number of your dice, then return this card to the Letnev player. As the Letnev, I don't want to give away my trade goods. I don't know if I'd give this one out, but it's also not one I'd be scrambling to get. Like if I'm another player, I don't know. It's one that I think as the Letnev player, I would want to keep it more than that if I were a different player, I would want to obtain it. Can't see it using too much use. I'm sure there's going to be situational. I'm sure there are going to be specific situations where that's useful. Can't imagine it seeing too much action though. So could be wrong. It's happened before. But that is my summary of the Barony of Letnev. Now with their national anthem, I'm going to try to embed it with the video. I'm 50-50 whether or not this one will work, so if it's not here, then check the description for the link. And have a nice evening and good gaming.
Welcome to space. What were you expecting? It's a dangerous place. Thank you for investing. Go there for your rota, there for your orders. Fill up these quotas, we'll bill for your quarters. Report to your foreman, but watch for marauders. Cause if you get eaten, there's fees for your mourners. Prosperity's there in the care of magnates. In halcyon heaven await. Did you think it was supposed to look like the poster? It mostly does, oh, if you'd only read closer. Just 10 short years to a new frontier. Snooze as you cruise and you'll wake up here. You've been trapped in that ship for an awful long time, so perhaps you have simply forgot what you signed. Oh, honestly, did you not read the colony policy that defined you as company property? That wavers your say in autonomy. The conglomerates got you in lock and key. We put the dollar back into idolatry. If you're upset, you can rent an apology. We are a family forged in bureaucracy. No I in teen, but there's con in economy. Were you expecting adventure? Were you hoping for fun? My friend, you're indentured and pleasure's exempt from your tenure. So venture back down to your slum that's provided at generous prices. Your worth is determined by your sacrifices. A small term of service went down on the surface. Internment's a freebie that comes with the purchase. We work to earn the right to work. 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 To earn the right to give ourselves the right to buy, ourselves the right to live, to earn the right to die.
To our little town, why don't you settle down? You just fill out the paperwork and you could look around. We're happy as can be inside the valley cannery. We live to pack the cans of meat and not to question where it's found until we end up in the ground around the corner in the yard. You know, we thought we liked the sound of finding glory in the stars. The borders taught us to be proud of never reaching very far. So we earn what we're allowed and give it right back at the bar.
The ale to cure what ails you. Zero G brew, your favorite flavor. So work till you bleed, ennobled by labor, then purchase relief from your local retailer. If you'd rather drop dead, that's fine, but you know to drop it down dead, there's a fine. So you do your job and I'll do mine. I gotta meet a 6 foot deep bottom line. We make a fortune for the board by selling boredom door to door, because it's all that we deserve and it is all we can afford. The secrets of the universe and all the worlds to be explored, but our dreams are back on earth and now the work is our reward. And you'll be grateful for seats at the table, though it dips at one end and the bench is unstable. You may waste your days, but at least you were able to pay off your grave since we leased you your cradle. Be faithful and pray we'll repay what you invest. Behave as you slave for humanity's interest. On account that you're all on account and we're quickly amounting humanity's interest. You'd think that we'd sink to the brink of rebellion with markets dependent on peddling weapons. The architect tells them the secret to heaven is simply consuming whatever we sell them. We work to earn the right to work. 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 To earn the right to give ourselves the right to buy, ourselves the right to live, to earn the right to die. Should've read the fine print, my friend. Should've read the fine print. You should've read the fine print, my friend. Should've read the fine print. Welcome to our little town. Why don't you settle down? You just fill out the paperwork and you can look around. We work and then 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 we end up in the ground. Welcome to our little town. Why don't you settle down? You just fill out the paperwork and you can look around. We work and then we work and then we work and then we work and then we work. Should've read the fine print. And here, and here, and initial here. Welcome to the family.
The Halcyon Holdings Corporation thanks you for choosing the Stupendium as your Etherwave entertainment provider, and also wishes to thank our esteemed Patreon investors. If you enjoyed this broadcast, you may consider our line of other musical entertainment presentations in the playlist, check out the brand new range of quality Stupendium merchandise, or indeed follow the link to join those hallowed halls of our Patreon investment board. Now get back to work.